resin printing without supports, thick nozzles, blobs of doom, and is it a cooling issue or is it a hardware issue? All this and more, PrintFix Friday, episode 77. Let's get into it. Hey guys, welcome back to the channel, and if you're new here and you like fixing fails, make sure to leave a like and get subscribed. We are on week 77 for fixing failures for people just like you, and remember, if you have failures that you would like to submit to us to take a look at, you can do so by sliding into those DMs on all the social medias, tagging us, and using the hashtag PrintFix, or email us directly, YouTube at 3dmusketeers.com. Links, of course, to all of that are in the description down below. And down there, you're also going to find information about today's sponsor, 3D Musketeers. Remember, if you are struggling to get your 3D prints running right, you can reach out to the pros at 3D Musketeers. We take a no BS approach to making your prints proper for you. With over 40 3D printers and over 40 years of combined experience, the staff and myself are here to help you make awesome every single day. Be it a physical object that needs to be digitized, now with 3 Artec 3D scanners, a Ray, an Eva, and now a Spider as well, we can get detail down to 50 microns or less with the technology that we have. So if you have a high-end item that needs to be scanned, hit us up. We're going to offer discounts from YouTube. Just make sure you mention the sponsor segues and we'll hook you up a little bit. And if you are looking to support the work that we do here, but you're not looking to spend some money on some 3D scanning or printing, you can do so by heading over to Patreon or YouTube channel members. Links, of course, are in that description down below. Join for as little as $1 a month. All that money goes directly into helping this channel grow and paying for itself, because it is incredibly expensive to put out as much content as we're doing, but I do hope you guys are enjoying it. We've actually been cutting down PrintFix Fridays and the podcast into short form content that is going out on all social medias. I'd love to know your thoughts on all of it, because some of the videos are performing well and others are really not performing well. Speaking of not performing well, let's get back into some printers behaving badly. First mini print, but missing some parts using an Elegoo Mars Pro. So we've got a resin printer here that is dealing with some issues on the part. Looking at the picture, we're missing something pretty critical from what I can tell. Yeah, there are no supports. So when doing resin printing, there are a couple of things you have to remember. You have to support things. Specifically for resin, you also want to reduce your cross-sectional area that is exposed to the FEP vat that you're working in. If you don't have a machine with an FEP vat, you still do want to reduce that cross-sectional area, because that will reduce the elongation problem that we see in the Z-axis. Now that software is getting better, it's not as common because we're able to deal with it on the software side, but it is still something to note that explicitly in the Z-axis, you can get some inaccuracies if your model is not properly designed to be printed in that orientation. Looking at this model, some support material would be amazing. We would want to tilt it back some and then support every bit. That includes the bottom of the axe, the actual chain bit there, which that's gonna suck to print, but hey, whatever, it's fine. And likely when he's tilted back, some of this grass down by the feet will need to be supported as well. We've got elbows, fingers, all these different areas that will need to be supported. And I will tell you, the big first issue here, get out of cheat box and get over to Lychee Slicer. We have videos on Lychee Slicer. We'll link to them up in the card and in that description down below. And we are probably due for a new one now that they've actually started to support FDM printers, which is pretty darn cool. But you definitely do want to make sure you support these models, because otherwise, yeah, you'll end up with prints just like that. What happened here? CR10S Pro V2, 0.8mm nozzle, 50mm a second, 210C and 50C. You've probably gone too darn fast. Yeah, you're not getting enough cooling. So this is a cooling issue from what I can tell. And let's see. So we're asking good questions here. Have you changed your nozzle size in your slicer? Good, that's a great question to ask, because if they didn't change it, you will see some problems. Hot and wiggle, this wouldn't be it. And if you are going to maintain speed with a larger nozzle, you will want to look at raising your temperatures, because you're trying to push more plastic through the same orifice at the same speed. So your millimeters cubed per second, that is your flow rate, has gone up, but you've done nothing to account for that when it comes to heating. Some people will say just go ahead and use a volcano style hot end that gives you a longer melt zone. But if you don't want to go that far, you will have to go ahead and up those temperatures. I do believe it's cooling, because we've got some curling on the edges. I believe we're also moving too fast. We can see that the actual appearance of the part changes. It goes from considerably more matte here to more shiny up here, and that is likely from longer cooling times that we will get down here as it is doing these little ribs or buttresses or whatever you do want to call them. But we are definitely moving around these corners too fast, and the corners are curling up. This is a common problem that we will see with a lack of cooling, and the CR10S Pro V2 is really not designed to be running a nozzle that large at that speed, so you're likely overrunning your hot end as well. So I have made the grave mistake of leaving my Ender 3 unsupervised during the beginning of a print. Is it even possible to fix? And if not, what parts exactly should I buy for replacements? Thanks. This is a classic case of the Blob of Doom, and unfortunately, it is likely that every one of you will deal with this at some point. It's why we talk about the importance of having spare parts. In this particular case, I would look at silicone sock, new heat break, new heat block, new nozzle, new heater, and new thermistor. Now, you probably don't need all of these components. You will likely only need a heater and a thermistor. But honestly, it's just easier sometimes to replace the whole darn thing. And quite frankly, for the price of these MK8 hot ends, just buy a whole new darn hot end and just unscrew that one and put it away for a future you problem rather than a current you problem. If you do still have power to the hot end and you are able to heat it up, you could go ahead and heat it up to, if this is PLA, maybe 220, 230 degrees centigrade, and just let it sit there. That extra heat should cause the plastic to slowly melt off of the hot end, giving you a much clearer picture as to the actual damage that is done. You can go in with some side cutters and try to remove it, but chances are you're going to snip some wires, and that will stop you dead in your tracks without something like a blowtorch or a hot air gun. Do of course be careful, don't use a blowtorch when the hot end is still in the printer, that's bad news bears, and will generally have you meeting your local fire department a little bit sooner than you think you might need to. But in a case like this is why having spare parts is important, and for these Ender style printers that use the MK8 hot ends, just have spare hot ends laying around. It is very easy to swap them out. It is 2 bolts and a couple of wires and you're done. I highly recommend that you do that. But if you do want to play hardball, you can absolutely sit there, chisel away at the plastic, let it hopefully melt a bit of itself off, and see if you can clean it up. Having wire brushes, ones that are made of copper, are generally my favorite for cleaning off any excess gunk from the hot ends themselves. We use ones that are from the firearms industry. I'll link to some in the description down below, and it's because they have both a little bit of a softer side and a shorter bristle that is good for really scrubbing some of the plastic off, and they have a decent length that allow you to get in there to do the work that you need without necessarily having a risk of burning yourself. They're great and they're relatively affordable, so bonus points there. Next up, a submission from one of our Patreon members, Omaha 3D Prints, and this is an interesting one. I have never tried this myself, but this is Polymaker's Polymax versus Polyterra. Exact same settings, exact same G-code, exact same printer. Something to note about Polyterra. It has a considerably higher density. Normally, PLA is going to be about 1.24 grams per cubic centimeter, but Polyterra is 1.31. I learned this the hard way when I used Polyterra to do prints that were 500 grams in normal plastic, and I did 2 of them on the same roll. You can see where this is going. Unfortunately, that print was non-recoverable. But I've never tried back and forth like this. Maybe we'll have to do a video on something like this. Let me know what you guys think in those comments below, because I've got both those materials here, and it would be curious to do a bit of a study between the two. Because to me, it looks like there's just no retraction versus yes retraction. Let me know. Otherwise, yeah, make sure that you have the right material loaded in your printer. I guess the issue that they were dealing with is that the Polymax and Polyterra look incredibly similar, and because the colors are basically the same, there was really no easy way for them to tell without really looking for the label. And as someone that's used Polymaker filament, sometimes those labels are not the easiest to find. To be clear, I do like Polymaker. I think their filament's pretty decent, and I have some of their more interesting materials, including a fire retardant polycarbonate, which I have a pretty interesting project planned for. So make sure you get subscribed if that's something you're interested in as well. But I've never seen it this bad between 2 different materials, so maybe I'll have to try it on my own. Next, a fail from our Patreon Discord as well. Remember, if you want to come hang out with all of us in the Discord server, you can join at the $10 tier or higher. And now we have a PayPal option. So if you don't really use Patreon, don't really use YouTube channel members, but you do use PayPal, let me know. You can email us, youtube@3dmusketeers.com, and I can go ahead and send you that link. We had someone that requested it, so I set it up. Now it's in availability for those that want it. This is from a Patreon member, Devoid Colossus, who has a belt tensioner for one of his printers, and it failed. And that means the entire axis just stops. They were doing a torture toaster, a phenomenal print if you're looking to test the actual tolerances of your printer and dial them in, because it tests so many things, including overhangs, tolerances, as well as folding hinges and the sort. But we can see the Y-axis belt here. The tensioner said, see you later, we're not playing this game, and decided that, well, the printer can no longer move in the Y direction. It was still moving in the X, actually reasonably well, and in some cases it looks like it tried to move in the Y, but no dice. This is a bit of a call to check your printers, especially if you have mods like Devoid Colossus has on his. You want to make sure your mods are actually there. And if this is a belt tensioner and you don't really ever want to deal with it, couple of dabs of super glue, shove that thing on, and other than having to cut it apart the next time you need to tension your belt, it shouldn't ever be something that you have to deal with in the near future. It sucks. I've been there before on printers similar to this. Back when we used to run Wanhao printers and the belt tensioners that we put on them would fall off, it would ruin prints. But I'm glad I'm done with some of those shady 3D printers. Frustrating waste of an afternoon and filament. We have a Bambu Lab P1P here that it's not a happy camper. Original poster says was suddenly having awful adhesion with a model. Tried switching from texture to high temperature with no improvement. The bottom layer was just garbage. Finally spotted that somehow I had ended up with a single dot dead center of the bottom of the model. The entire first layer wasn't actually a first layer. It was printing one layer up in space. Use a slicer to cut off a tiny slither of the bottom of the model, and I'm back to a perfect first layer. This is something really important to remember. When you slice up a model, make sure you look at it. You can easily move them around in any slicer, whether it's Bambu Studio, Prusa Slicer, Cura, or any of the others, and check to make sure that you don't have an entire first layer that's basically riding on air. And I'm curious because I thought Bambu would tell you this, but maybe they don't. Maybe I'm just remembering something incorrectly. But there is no amount of proper printer, proper settings, proper whatever, that could stop this from being a problem if there wasn't a sanity check done by the slicer saying, hey, just so you know, this is basically all free floating and you probably want to fix that. I'm glad that this is a solution that stems from a problem. And this can be incredibly frustrating because you're chasing a dragon that you believe is bad adhesion. And while you're not technically wrong, it's a bad file that didn't have proper adhesion to the build surface. I have been there before. I know what this feels like, and it's disheartening to be really pushing toward a solution that you think is right, and then to find out that Occam's razor bit you in the keister, which is oftentimes the simplest solution is the best one, and that is go back to your roots. Check your slicer, make sure everything is good there first before you start tearing into the machine itself. I'm glad this is an all's well that ends well story, but I certainly wouldn't have been happy to wake up to a printer that looks like that. And being a P1P, it doesn't have all of those fun AI features that the X1 Carbon has. There isn't really a way to know this. While it does have an optional camera that you can watch from, it's only a few frames a second. Mind you, you would have been able to see this through that camera. Another submission from Devoid Colossus, who has a bit of a problem here. This is an idea former belt printer, and according to Mr. Colossus, these are some of the best belt printers that he has ever used, and I would love to be able to take a look at one, hopefully relatively soon. And he's been struggling a lot with these. We have an entire PrintFixFriday channel in our Patreon Discord where we don't only post things to go into the videos, but we go there to help each other out and try to solve the problems, because ultimately nobody likes having printer failures, right? That's what it's there for. And yeah, this is a bed adhesion issue and a bed leveling issue. And when I say bed, I really mean belt. This is a belt printer that has an infinite Y-axis. It is one continuous loop of, in this case, blue fabric that enables you to print parts that are technically infinitely long in the y-axis. So things like cosplay props that are swords or staffs or things like that are very easy, and you're not limited anymore to certain constraints, at least in one axis. But there is a particular problem with belt printers. They suck to level, because if you're off by even a little bit, the belt will start tracking left or right throughout the print, causing shifting to occur. But you also have to make sure that the part is going to stay adhered to the belt as the belt moves. But unlike regular 3D printing, where you really do want great first layer adhesion, you don't want too great adhesion on belt printers, because then as it comes to the end of the roller, it won't release as it is supposed to. It is way more technically complicated to deal with belt printers than it is to deal with this standard Cartesian or even Core XY 3D printer. So if you play with belts, let me know some of your tips and tricks in those comments below. We actually have a CR30 that I've never shown on the channel because I'm kind of afraid to use it, and I'm waiting for my buddy Alan, or Pooch from Repcord, to put out an entire upgrade kit for them, because I really don't want to mess with a 80% machine when I can get one that is much nicer with a couple $100 worth of awesome upgrades from someone that knows how to run them like a professional. But it is something that I know is a common plague in the belt 3D printing industry, is that it is really finicky, and it doesn't take much to throw the entire system off. But I guess we have about 3 hours worth of good part and about 6 hours worth of 0.6mm spaghetti. Thankfully, it's not that bad of a failure and can easily be pushed right into a trash can and didn't cause any further damage on the machine. So I'm not going to call this a win, but I'm not going to call this as bad of a fail as it absolutely could have been. I need help. My last few prints have been coming out like this, but it's only just now doing it. I've printed other successful prints on this printer, but now it comes out in blobs and blotches. I've tried re-leveling the bed and adjusting the layer height, but nothing seems to work. This is a classic case of a partially clogged nozzle, and we can see that by the lines that are occurring here. While it could be something mechanical, it's generally just a clogged nozzle, and the top commenters absolutely got it. And with enders, again, have spare nozzles laying around, just replace it. You can try to clean it out, and some people will recommend acupuncture needles. I, however, do not. The acupuncture needles are made of hardened steel, while your nozzle is made of brass. And while I'm not a metallurgy expert, I do know that steel is harder than brass, and by sounding your nozzle with a steel rod, you're going to cause some damage to it. The Mark 8 nozzles that these printers use are incredibly affordable, so having a bucket of them sitting around to just quickly replace as you run into problems like this is likely a better option as far as I'm concerned. Now, there could also be some other stiction or friction inside of your motion system, so check your PTFE Bowden tube as well to make sure that it is clean and free-flowing. If it is, yeah, it's going to be your nozzle, but realistically, it's probably your nozzle anyways. So check the tube just to make sure, but it's time to either take off the nozzle, clean it out with a torch, and then do some cold pulls, or just replace it outright. Speaking of cold pulls, Stefan from CNC Kitchen made an absolutely amazing photo of what it looks like on a cold pull. Now, I want to be clear, this is a really, really tiny piece and an amazing bit of macro photography. So first off, kudos. Amazing photo. And second off, damn Stefan, you're a dirty boy. What have you been up to these days? This is what it looks like to do a cold pull on a nozzle. Believe it or not, filament is not generally 100% pure. There might be contaminants, whether it be dust, dirt, grime, or in this case, that's a little piece of metal that I see. There's gold in them there hills, or brass, I guess. And you also end up with carbonized material, like bits of filament that have just gotten stuck to the inside of your nozzle bore. Every now and then it is good to do a cold pull. The best way to do it is heat your printer up to operating temperature, extrude some filament, cool it down to somewhere in the 70 to 100 degree mark, release your extruder pressure, and then just give it the beans and pull it out. That should generally clean it out. And you want to keep doing it until it doesn't look like this and ends up looking considerably cleaner. easier. But I thought this was important to show because while this is likely quite an edge case for what it can look like, it's not all too uncommon for people to find a bunch of crap like that inside of their hot end. It's a good bit of practice to do every now and then, and if you haven't done it in the past 6 months, you should go ahead and do that. This is the one time where I actually prefer to use white filament over other colors because it generally shows the crap quite a bit easier. If you do a cold pull and it looks like this, you should probably go back for another one. Last but certainly not least, a tweet from my buddy, Uncle Jessy. We got to go out for sushi again, my dude. We got green base on the left at 0.2 layer height on the Bambu X1 Carbon, a $1,200 printer, and 2 hours of print time. The green base on the right at 0.2 layer height is on the Elegoo Neptune 3 Pro, a $230 printer with a 7-hour print time. Clearly need to dial in those settings on this Polymaker PLA. Yep, we've got some extrusion issues. So remember, left is Bambu, right is Elegoo. And this is a thing that I've talked about, but I don't think I've seen this bad for a while. This is a cooling issue and an extrusion issue. I had similar issues with my X1 Carbon, and Uncle Jessy here is dealing with kind of that. So we see that one side of the print looks fine, but the other side of the print kind of looks like crap. So he's loving the X1, but man, it does seem to have a tough time with curved surfaces. Having similar issues with a helmet stand that he printed, might try to do a deep clean of it. Needed a quick second base for a video project, and it did its job. And he says in the second pick, you can see that the fan inside of the X1 was hitting the print versus the side of the first pick, which had no cooling. So in this case, it could be that because there's not enough cooling, the PLA itself is curling up. But I believe the stock cooling inside of the X1 Carbon should be enough. In some cases for me, it's been fine, but in others, it just doesn't work right. The Bambu Lab X1 Carbon has a massive auxiliary cooling fan that blows across one side of the print. And before you say, why Grant, why don't they just put one on both sides? That's because the air would cancel each other out, and at the center of the build plate, you would have zero airflow, which would be kind of funny, unless you ran them at slightly different speeds, but then they'd be fighting each other rather than cooling down the part that's necessary. So Bambu chose to do it from one side and one side only. Personally, I find that interior aux cooling fan to be more problems than it's worth, but for Uncle Jessy here, it was kind of a requirement to get half decent looking prints, and where it stopped hitting the part, it started to look like crap again. Now, this is slightly indicative of a partial clog or some sort of drag inside of the system, and I've dealt with this too. I've got a couple of benchies that we're going to show in an upcoming video that dealt with this problem. In fact, it occurred on the live stream. If you guys want to see that, we'll card to it. It's very close to the end, maybe in the last half hour of the stream where we look at these benchies. And the two that the printer did look like crap. And the AMS was providing a fair bit of drag, and maybe there is some drag in Uncle Jessy's machine as well. This is kind of a known issue that because of all the Bowden tube, all the connectors, you're going to get a fair bit of drag. I've seen some people try to deal with this by replacing the cheap PTFE tube utilized by Bambu with something like Cap Tube from Capricorn. While I haven't done that mod myself because I was very strict in sticking to the book for the things that I did with my machine, I would certainly advise it to those that are dealing with a drag issue. The other thing is to print the part that gives you the constant curve going into the hot end itself. I believe that glass plate on the top of the X1 Carbon is very close to the actual hot end itself, causing the PTFE tube to have a pretty significant radius to it, which could cause excess drag. The printed part keeps it in line a little bit better, but is certainly not going to be a magic bullet to solve the drag issues. For me, even when we removed the AMS, I was still dealing with drag issues. And while this could be related to a partially clogged nozzle, I've changed out my nozzle many times, and eventually even Bambu agreed. I have a lemon, and it was actually delivered to Bambu earlier this week, so I'm awaiting to hear back what they have to say and the eventual shipment of a replacement printer. So again, if you're into that kind of thing, make sure to leave a like and get subscribed because yeah, we're definitely gonna do Bambu unboxing 2 Electric Boogaloo. Stay tuned for that one. But as far as advice, definitely look at cleaning out that nozzle. Bambu provides a acupuncture needle to clean that out. That's always a good move, but as we saw earlier, cold pulls are also phenomenal to do. It is is tougher to do with a Bambu though, because there is no way to remove the extruder pressure from the extruder that is sitting inside of the hot end. It is a literal screw that is hidden behind some fascia panels. In this particular case, I would say remove the entire extruder from the printer, manually load filament into the hot end, and then do the heat up, cool down, and pull cycle until it comes out clean. That's pretty much the only way to do a cold pull on a Bambu that I am aware of. If you happen to know a different one, let me know in those comments down below. Well, that's all I have for you guys today. I'd love to know your thoughts and opinions on this, as well as the video that we put out earlier this week where I talked about a big problem in this industry, and it seems like it's being taken well. Only a couple of trolls. And if you want to see how I've responded to them, go check out the Twitter thread all about it. We'll link to it in the description down below. But stay safe out there. Don't forget to call your loved ones. And as always, keep making awesome. Have a good one. Can I help you? What do you, what? Got your nose. Oh. I didn't boop. I tried to boop. Can we boop? Can we boop? We booped. Booped. Snoot has been booped. Hey, thanks so much for watching this video, and a massive thank you goes out to all of our Patreon and YouTube channel member supporters who are listed right next to Meow at the $5 tier and higher. Thank you for allowing me to eat the finest kibble in the world. Right below Meow will be the entire PrintFixFriday series, where you can get your fails fixed and see how we fixed others in the past. And right next to that will be the entire printer maintenance series, so you can work on dealing with your printers. I'm going to go have myself a nap while you guys go into those comments and leave some of your thoughts, and I will hopefully see you in the next one, but Grant absolutely will. Take care. Meow meow.